She's practically gone already. Why waste my evening? Anderson Rodney muttered, checking his Rolex as the ER monitor beeped weakly behind him. He smoothed his navy suit jacket, the gold watch catching the fluorescent light. Don't die too loudly, Shirley. I have a career to launch. The nurse's jaw dropped. His wife, Shirley, lay motionless on the bed, oxygen mask fogging with each shallow breath. Her chest rose and fell with mechanical rhythm. The machines kept her alive. Anderson kept his back turned. "Mr. Rodney, she could still hear you," the doctor began. "Doubtful," Anderson cut him off with a dismissive wave. "And even if she could, what's she going to do, sue me?" He laughed, a cold sound that didn't belong in a place where people fought for life. What they didn't know, what Anderson couldn't possibly imagine, was that in less than 3 hours, the woman they believed was slipping away would be sitting upright, fully conscious, and holding the keys to his entire world. Shirley lay still beneath the thin white sheets. The hospital gown hung loose on her frame. Cold air from the AC vent brushed across her pale skin. Wires traced from her chest to monitors that blinked and hummed. The doctors had told Anderson her brain activity was minimal. They had suggested he stay close. The family had already started making assumptions. What none of them knew was that Shirley heard everything. She heard Anderson's sigh of relief when the doctor stepped away. She heard the rustle of his expensive suit as he turned toward the door. She heard the click of his Italian leather shoes against the linoleum floor. Her mind was screaming. Her body refused to obey. She tried to open her eyes. She tried to curl her fingers. Nothing moved. She was locked inside herself, a prisoner in her own flesh. Anderson pulled out his phone and typed rapidly. "Finally heading out. Crisis handled. See you at the Apex Club in 20. He hit send and glanced back one last time at the woman in the bed. 3 years of playing the devoted husband, he said quietly, almost to himself. 3 years of pretending her boring charity galas and quiet dinners were enough. He shook his head slowly, a smirk tugging at his lips. At least now I can stop pretending. A woman's voice came through his phone, his mistress. Is she really that bad, baby? She's done, Anderson said, his voice flat and final. The doctor said massive organ strain, probable brain damage. Even if she wakes up, she won't be the same. He paused at the door, one hand on the frame. Honestly, Simone, she worked herself to death. All those late nights at the foundation office, all that stress trying to prove she was more than just a housewife. His laugh was bitter. Turns out she was just fragile. Shirley remembered those late nights. She remembered the boardrooms. She remembered sitting across from investors while Anderson slept. She remembered signing contracts in secret. She remembered building an empire while he took credit for a mid-level management position she'd created for him. She remembered telling herself, just give him time. He'll love you for you, not what you can give him. Now she lay still, listening to him reduce her life to weakness. If you think Anderson deserves what's coming to him, subscribe so you don't miss the moment karma catches up, and drop a comment telling me you're not on Anderson's side, because anyone who celebrates their wife's death doesn't deserve allies. Let me know where you're watching from, and I'll make sure justice finds its way to your feed. Anderson's mother appeared in the doorway, dressed in black as if the funeral had already been planned. "So it's really happening," she said, her tone carrying the faintest hint of satisfaction. "I told you, Anderson, women who try to do too much forget their role. A wife should support, not exhaust herself trying to be important." She stepped closer to the bed and looked down at Shirley's closed eyes. All that running around, all those business meetings she never explained. She clicked her tongue. And for what? She still couldn't keep her husband interested. "At least now you're free," she added softly, patting Anderson's shoulder. Free. That word cut through Shirley's consciousness like a blade. Free from her. Free from the woman who built everything he stood on. Free from the wife who loved him enough to hide the truth. "She's not technically dead," the doctor said from behind them, his voice tight with professional restraint. "She's in a neurological event. There's still a chance." "Let's be realistic, doctor," Anderson interrupted, turning with that permanent smirk of his. "She's already gone. The woman I married, she's not coming back." He straightened his tie. "So let's not drag this out. I'll be reachable by phone. Call me when it's over." And then he was gone. The door swung shut. The sound of his footsteps faded down the corridor. The nurse stood frozen, staring at the space where he'd been. The doctor's hands clenched around his clipboard. Inside her still body, Shirley felt something shift. Not her muscles, not her lungs, something deeper. The part of her that had been silent for years, the part that had built a conglomerate from nothing, the part that made men in boardrooms tremble, the part she'd buried to be a normal wife. That part was waking up, and it was furious. The Apex Club sat 40 stories above the city, all glass walls and gold fixtures that screamed wealth louder than words ever could. Anderson stepped out of his Uber, Shirley's Uber account technically, and straightened his navy suit one more time before the entrance. The doorman nodded with the kind of respect reserved for people who looked important, even if they weren't. "Mr. Rodney, good to see you, sir." Anderson's smirk deepened. If only they knew. If only any of them knew that by tomorrow morning, he wouldn't just be good to see, he'd be untouchable. Inside, the bass thumped through expensive speakers, the kind of sound that vibrated in your chest and made you feel alive. Crystal chandeliers caught the rotating lights. Women in cocktail dresses laughed too loud. Men in tailored suits stood in tight circles, cigars in one hand, whiskey in the other. This was power. This was where decisions got made. Anderson, a colleague from the marketing division, waved him over, drink already extended. "We didn't think you'd make it. How's Shirley?" Anderson accepted the glass without missing a beat. "She's resting at home," he said smoothly, taking a sip. "You know how she is, always overdoing it with those charity projects. I told her to take it easy, but she never listens." He shrugged like a man who'd done all he could. "She insisted I come tonight, said she didn't want me to miss this." "That's love right there," another man chimed in, clapping Anderson on the shoulder. "Yeah," Anderson said, his smile tight. "I really do." He moved through the crowd with practiced ease, shaking hands, laughing at jokes that weren't funny, playing the part he'd perfected over 3 years of marriage. The part of the ambitious executive, the part of the devoted husband, the part of the man who deserved more than what life had given him. Across the room, Simone appeared. She wore a black dress that left little to the imagination, her dark hair falling in waves over her shoulders. She caught his eye and tilted her head toward the private lounge area. Anderson excused himself with a lie about needing to make a call and followed. Back at the hospital, the night shift had settled in. Nurses moved quietly through hallways. Machines beeped in steady rhythm. In room 304, Shirley Rodney lay exactly as Anderson had left her, motionless, pale, barely there. Except she was there, fully, completely, agonizingly there. The fluorescent lights hummed above her. The oxygen mask pressed against her face. The IV in her arm sent cold fluid into her veins. She felt all of it. She heard the nurse come in to check her vitals, the soft beep as readings were logged, the gentle adjustment of her blanket. "Poor thing," the nurse whispered to someone in the hallway. "Husband didn't even stay an hour. Can you imagine?" "I heard he had some work thing. Still though, if that were my wife." Their voices faded as they moved down the corridor. Shirley wanted to scream. She wanted to sit up and tell them that the work thing was a party, that her husband was probably already drunk, that the woman he called his wife was actually the woman who owned the building where his work thing was happening. The irony would have made her laugh if she could move her mouth. Dr. Marcus Chen entered the room, his footsteps slow and deliberate. He'd been her father's doctor before he became hers. He was one of the few people who knew exactly who Shirley Rodney was. Not the quiet wife of a mid-level executive, but the silent founder of a multi-billion-dollar empire. "Shirley," he said quietly, standing beside her bed, "if you can hear me, I need you to know we're doing everything we can. Your vitals are stabilizing, but neurologically..." He paused, and she heard him flip through her chart. "Your husband was informed of the severity. I don't understand why he's not here." Because he doesn't care, Shirley thought. Because he never did. Because to him, I'm just an obstacle that finally got out of the way. Dr. Chen sighed and placed the chart back on its hook. "Your father would have my head if he knew I let you end up like this," he muttered. Robert built an empire for you to inherit, and you've grown it beyond even his wildest dreams. You don't deserve this, Shirley. You deserve so much more." His words echoed in the prison of her mind. Her father, the man who taught her to read balance sheets before bedtime stories, the man who'd made her promise to never let anyone, man or woman, diminish her power, the man who died believing she'd found a partner worthy of the legacy he'd left behind. She'd failed him. She'd let Anderson play the role of supportive husband while she played the role of invisible CEO. She'd funded his lifestyle, his car, his promotions, all while hiding behind anonymous board votes and proxy signatures. She told herself it was love, that if he just loved her for her, without knowing about the money, then it would be real. But love built on lies wasn't love at all. Simone pressed a champagne flute into Anderson's hand the moment he stepped into the lounge. "To new beginnings," she said, her smile sharp and hungry. Anderson clinked his glass against hers. "To freedom." They drank, and Anderson felt the weight of the last 3 years start to lift. No more pretending to care about foundation galas. No more listening to Shirley talk about making a difference, when all he wanted was to make a fortune. No more playing second fiddle to a woman who thought being quietly important was better than being loudly powerful. "So tell me," Simone said, leaning back against the leather couch, "what's this big move you keep hinting at?" Anderson's eyes gleamed. He looked around to make sure no one was listening, then leaned in close. "Tomorrow morning, I'm meeting with the CEO of Rodney Global, the actual CEO, not some board representative, not some proxy, the real person who runs the whole operation." Simone's eyebrows rose. "I thought no one knew who that was." "Exactly," Anderson said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "It's been a mystery for years, but I've been making moves, Simone, strategic moves. I've positioned myself perfectly. Tomorrow, I'm getting promoted to Executive Vice President of Operations, direct report to the CEO, 6-figure salary bump, stock options, corner office, the works." "And Shirley?" Simone asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. Anderson took another sip of champagne. "Life insurance pays out double for accidental death or sudden medical crisis. The moment they declare her brain dead, I'm a very wealthy widower," he smiled. "Wealthy enough to give you everything you've ever wanted." Simone traced a finger along the rim of her glass. "You really think it'll be that easy?" "I know it will," Anderson said, his arrogance filling the space between them. "Shirley never had any family beyond her father, and he's been dead for 5 years. No siblings, no cousins who care, just me. Everything she inherited, I inherit. Everything she owned, I own." He laughed, the sound cold and certain. "By next week, I'll be running Rodney Global and sitting on her estate. It's almost too perfect." "What if she wakes up?" Simone asked, though she said it like someone asking about rain during a drought. Possible, but unlikely. Anderson's smile didn't falter. "She won't, and even if she did, the damage is done. Her brain's been without proper oxygen for too long. She'd be a vegetable at best. Either way, she's not coming back." He raised his glass. "So here's to Shirley Rodney. May she rest in peace and leave me everything." They drank again, and the music thumped louder, and Anderson felt like a man who'd finally won the game he'd been playing since the day he said, "I do." In room 304, something changed. It started as a twitch, a slight tremor in Shirley's left hand, so small that if the nurse had been in the room, she might have missed it. But Dr. Chen was there, updating her chart one last time before his shift ended, and he saw it. His head snapped up. He stared at her hand, waiting, watching. Another twitch, stronger this time. Her index finger lifted a fraction of an inch, then fell back against the sheets. Dr. Chen moved to her bedside in 3 quick steps. He leaned down, his voice urgent but calm. "Shirley? Shirley, if you can hear me, try to move your hand again." Inside, Shirley focused every ounce of willpower she had. She'd been trying for hours, screaming into the void of her own body, begging her muscles to obey. But now, something was different. The fog was lifting. The connection between her mind and her body was sparking back to life. Her hand moved again. This time, all 5 fingers twitched. Dr. Chen grabbed the pen light from his pocket and gently lifted her eyelid. He shone the light into her eye, checking for pupil response. "Come on, Shirley. I know you're in there. Robert's daughter doesn't give up. Show me you're fighting." She wanted to speak. She wanted to tell him she'd heard everything Anderson said. She wanted to tell him to call security, to freeze Anderson's access, to protect what she'd built. But her voice was still locked away, buried beneath layers of neurological shutdown. Her fingers curled into a fist. Dr. Chen's face broke into something between relief and disbelief. That's it, Shirley." He pressed the call button for the nurse. "I need a full neuro panel now. And page Dr. Sullivan. Tell her we have emerging consciousness in 304. Footsteps hurried down the hallway. The nurse appeared, eyes wide. "Doctor?" "She's waking up," Dr. Chen said, his voice steady, despite the adrenaline clearly coursing through him. "Get me the equipment. We need to stabilize her and assess cognitive function." The next 20 minutes were a blur of lights and tests and quiet commands. Shirley felt her body slowly coming back online. Not all at once, but in pieces. A toe here, a shoulder there. Her eyelids fluttered, but didn't open. Her throat tried to swallow, but couldn't quite manage it. And then, finally, her eyes opened. The world came rushing back in harsh fluorescent white. She blinked, her vision blurry and unfocused. Dr. Chen's face appeared above her, his expression a mixture of professional calm and personal relief. "Welcome back," he said softly. Her mouth moved. No sound came out first, just a dry rasp of air. Dr. Chen held up a hand. "Don't try to talk yet. Your vocal cords need time. Just nod if you can understand me." She nodded, barely, but it was there. "Good," Dr. Chen said. He pulled up a chair and sat beside her bed. "Shirley, you've been in a neurological crisis for the past several hours. You're stable now, but I need to know, do you remember what happened before you collapsed?" She nodded. Dr. Chen's jaw tightened. "Your husband left approximately 3 hours ago. He said to call him when it was over." The distaste in his voice was barely concealed. "Do you want me to call him?" Shirley's eyes sharpened. She shook her head slowly, deliberately. Dr. Chan leaned closer. "What do you need?" She swallowed, the effort monumental. Her lips moved, forming silent words. Dr. Chen watched carefully, reading her lips. "Don't call him." "I won't," Dr. Chen promised. Shirley's hand lifted weakly, gesturing toward the table beside her bed. Dr. Chen followed her gaze and saw her phone sitting there, untouched since she'd arrived. He picked it up and held it where she could see it. Her fingers trembled as she pointed to the phone, then to Dr. Chen, then made a circular motion with her finger. Dr. Chen understood. "You want me to make a call for you?" She nodded. "Who should I call?" Shirley's mouth moved again, and this time sound came with it, rough and barely audible, but unmistakable. "Board of Directors." Dr. Chen's eyes widened. He'd known Shirley was important. He'd known she came from wealth. But the way she said those words, the authority that managed to seep through even in her weakened state, made him realize he'd been underestimating her for years. "The board of directors," he repeated slowly, "of Rodney Global." She nodded. "You want me to call them now?" Another nod. Dr. Chen sat back in his chair, processing what she was asking. "Shirley, I don't understand. Why the board? Why not your husband? Why not?" And then it clicked. The pieces fell into place like tumblers in a lock. The anonymous CEO, the mysterious founder, the woman who'd built an empire in shadows. "You," he said quietly, "you're the CEO." Shirley's eyes said everything her voice couldn't. Yes, finally, someone knew. Dr. Chen ran a hand through his hair, the full weight of the situation settling on his shoulders. "Anderson doesn't know, does he?" She shook her head. "And you want to keep it that way?" She nodded, and her lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile, but carried the same energy. It was the look of a woman who'd been underestimated for far too long and was about to remind everyone exactly who she was. Dr. Chen stood and pulled out his own phone. "What's the number?" Shirley's hand lifted, shaking but determined. She pointed to her phone again, then made a typing motion. Dr. Chen unlocked it. Her passcode was her father's birthday, something he knew from years of family history, and scrolled through her contacts until he found what he was looking for. Rodney Global, Executive Board, Emergency Line. He looked at Shirley one more time, making sure this was what she wanted. She nodded, her gaze steady despite the exhaustion written across her face. Dr. Chen dialed. The phone rang twice before a crisp, professional voice answered. Rodney Global Emergency Line, this is Patricia Hamilton speaking. Miss Hamilton, this is Dr. Marcus Chen calling from Memorial Hospital. I'm calling on behalf of Shirley Rodney. She's awake and requesting an immediate emergency board meeting. There was a pause on the other end. When Patricia spoke again, her voice had shifted from professional to something closer to reverent. Dr. Chen, did you say Shirley Rodney is awake? Yes. And she's requesting a board meeting? Immediately. Another pause, and Dr. Chen heard rapid typing in the background. We'll have the board assembled within the hour. Does she need us to come to her, or... Shirley made a gesture, and Dr. Chen interpreted. She'll remain here at the hospital. She's requesting the meeting be held in the VIP Founder Suite on the top floor. I assume you know where that is. We do, Patricia said, and there was something like relief in her voice. Dr. Chen, please tell Miss Rodney that we're mobilizing now. We've been waiting for her to resurface. She'll be ready, Dr. Chen said and ended the call. He turned back to Shirley, who was watching him with eyes that were growing sharper by the minute. The fog of her medical crisis was lifting, and underneath it was steel. The board is coming. They'll be here within the hour. But Shirley, you need to rest. You need to... She shook her head and spoke again, her voice still hoarse but gaining strength. Help me sit up. Absolutely not. You need... Help me. She repeated, and this time there was no room for argument. Dr. Chen sighed and pressed the button to raise her bed into a sitting position. Shirley winced but didn't complain. She looked down at her hospital gown, then at Dr. Chen with an expression that clearly said, "This won't do." "You want clothes," he said, more statement than question. She nodded. "I'll have someone bring options from the hospital boutique. VIP patients keep emergency wardrobes here for situations like this." He paused. Situations less dramatic than this usually, but still. Shirley's lips twitched into an almost smile. Then her expression hardened and she spoke 4 words that Dr. Chen knew would change everything. "Don't call my husband." "I won't. I promise. But Shirley, eventually he'll need to know you're awake. When I'm ready to tell him. Dr. Chen nodded slowly, understanding passing between them. Anderson Rodney had walked out of this hospital believing his wife was dying. He was going to return to find out she'd risen from the dead, and the dead woman he'd dismissed was the one person who could destroy him. Understood, Dr. Chen said. I'll prepare the founder suite and make sure you have everything you need. But Shirley, I have to ask, what are you planning? Shirley looked at him, and for the first time since waking, she smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It wasn't a kind smile. It was a smile of a woman who'd played weak for too long and was about to remind the world that mercy was a choice, not a weakness. Justice, she said simply. I'm planning justice. Back at the Apex Club, Anderson had gathered a small crowd. He stood at the center of the lounge, champagne glass raised high, his navy suit jacket unbuttoned in a show of relaxed confidence. Simone stood beside him, her hands resting possessively on his arm. The music had shifted to something slower, more sophisticated, and the lighting had dimmed to that perfect shade of amber that made everyone look like they belonged in a luxury advertisement. A toast, Anderson announced, his voice carrying over the ambient noise. A dozen faces turned toward him, colleagues and acquaintances who'd known him as the ambitious executive with the quiet wife. To new beginnings, to finally breaking free from the things that hold us back, to stepping into the power we've always deserved. Hear, hear, someone shouted, and glasses clinked all around. Anderson drank deeply, feeling the champagne burn its way down his throat. This was it. This was the moment his life finally started. No more pretending, no more playing small. Tomorrow morning, he'd walk into that meeting with the CEO and claim his place at the top. And Shirley, poor, exhausted, dying Shirley, would be nothing but a footnote in his success story. What Anderson didn't know was that 3 floors below, in a private conference room reserved for Rodney Global's legal team, 4 lawyers were already at work. They sat around a polished mahogany table, laptops open, phones pressed to ears, executing orders that had come directly from Patricia Hamilton, who'd received them directly from Shirley Rodney herself. Freeze all accounts under Anderson Rodney's name. Corporate credit cards, expense accounts, stock options that haven't vested, everything. Yes, I'm aware he's the husband. I'm also aware of who's giving the order. Do it now. On another call, a second lawyer was already 3 steps ahead. I need a full audit of all purchases made on Shirley Rodney's accounts for the past 3 years. Every car payment, every mortgage payment, every luxury purchase. If Anderson Rodney benefited from it, I want documentation. We're building an asset recovery case. A third attorney was drafting termination papers, the kind that left no room for negotiation, no possibility of severance, no golden parachute to soften the fall. Just a clean, brutal severance from Rodney Global and everything Anderson thought he'd built there. The fourth lawyer, the youngest but perhaps the sharpest, was working on something more personal. Divorce papers. The kind that came with forensic accountants and fraud investigators attached. The kind that didn't ask for a split, it demanded restitution. They worked in synchronized efficiency, these lawyers who'd been on retainer for Shirley Rodney for years, always ready for the call that would finally unleash them. They'd watched Anderson climb the corporate ladder using his wife's invisible hand. They documented every inflated promotion, every unearned bonus, every business trip that looked more like a vacation. And now, finally, they had permission to dismantle everything he'd taken. "How long until the accounts are frozen?" the lead attorney asked. "Already done," came the response from the phone. "As of 2 minutes ago, Anderson Rodney no longer has access to any corporate funds. His corporate credit card will be declined at his next purchase." The lead attorney smiled. "Perfect. Let him try to pay for another round." Anderson was doing exactly that. He just ordered a bottle of Dom Perignon, the 2008 vintage, because why not celebrate properly, and handed his corporate black card to the bartender with the casual confidence of a man who'd never been declined in his life. The bartender swiped the card. The machine beeped. He swiped it again. Another beep. "I'm sorry, sir," the bartender said carefully. "This card is being declined. Do you have another form of payment?" Anderson's smile faltered. "That's impossible. Try it again." The bartender swiped a third time. Same result. "It's showing as restricted, sir. The account appears to be frozen." "Frozen?" Anderson's voice rose slightly. Several people nearby turned to look. "That's a corporate card. It can't be frozen. There must be some mistake. I can call the number on the back if you'd like." "No," Anderson interrupted, pulling out his personal credit card and handing it over with more force than necessary. "Just use this." The personal card went through, but the damage was done. Anderson felt a prickle of unease crawl up his spine. A frozen corporate card didn't just happen. That required authorization from high up the chain. But who would authorize that, and why now, of all nights? He shook it off and returned to the group with a forced smile, but the champagne tasted slightly bitter now. Simone pulled him aside, her expression concerned. "What was that about?" "Nothing," Anderson said quickly. "Just some IT glitch with the corporate system. I'll sort it out tomorrow." But even as he said it, his phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out and saw an email notification from the HR department. Subject line, "Urgent, account access update." He didn't open it, not here, not in front of everyone, but the unease that had been a prickle was now a knot in his stomach. "You okay?" Simone asked, her hand on his arm. "Fine," Anderson lied. "Let's dance." They moved to the dance floor, but Anderson's mind was elsewhere. Another buzz, another email, this one from the company's financial department. He ignored it and pulled Simone closer, trying to lose himself in the music, in the moment, in the fantasy of the life he thought he'd secured. He didn't notice Patricia Hamilton entering the club 20 minutes later. She didn't approach him. She simply stood near the entrance, observing, taking notes, documenting who he was with, how he was behaving, how thoroughly he was celebrating while his wife lay in a hospital bed. Evidence. Everything was evidence now. At Memorial Hospital, the Founder's Suite looked nothing like the sterile ER room where Shirley had nearly died. It occupied the entire top floor of the West Wing and had been designed by Shirley's father as a private retreat for the family during medical emergencies. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city. The furniture was mahogany and leather. The lighting was warm and adjustable. There was a full executive desk, a conference table, and a bedroom suite in the back. It was a hospital room disguised as a corner office, and that was exactly what Shirley needed. Dr. Chen had helped her into the suite 2 hours ago, and since then she'd been transformed. Gone was the hospital gown. In its place, she wore a charcoal gray blazer with sharp shoulder pads over a crisp white blouse. Her hair had been pulled back into a severe bun. Her face, though still pale, had been given color with the help of a makeup artist who had arrived within minutes of being called. She looked like what she was, a CEO who'd been absent too long and was now reclaiming her throne. The board members had arrived one by one, each more relieved than the last to see her sitting upright behind the desk. Patricia Hamilton had been the first, nearly in tears. "Miss Rodney, we've been so worried. When you collapsed during the last private meeting—" "I know," Shirley had said, her voice still hoarse but firm. "And I know you've all kept the company running in my absence. That ends tonight. I'm back, and there are things that need to be corrected immediately." She'd spent the last 90 minutes briefing the board on Anderson, on the lies he told, on the promotions he'd claimed credit for, on the meeting he thought he had scheduled for tomorrow morning with the mysterious CEO. "He thinks he's being promoted," Shirley had explained, her voice growing stronger with each word. "He thinks he's about to become Executive Vice President of Operations. He thinks he's earned it through hard work and strategic positioning." She'd paused, letting the absurdity sink in. "What he doesn't know is that every door he's walked through, I opened. Every opportunity he seized, I created. Every success he celebrated, I engineered." The board members had listened in stunned silence. They'd known Shirley preferred to operate behind the scenes. They'd known she valued privacy, but they hadn't realized the extent to which she'd hidden her identity, even from her own husband. "So what's the plan?" Patricia had asked. Shirley's smile had been cold. "Call him. Tell him his boss wants to see him immediately. Tonight. Tell him it's urgent that the CEO heard about his family crisis and wants to meet with him personally to discuss his dedication to the company." "You want him to come here, now?" "I want him to walk in thinking he's about to get everything he's ever wanted. And then I want him to see me," Shirley had said. Now, at 11:48 p.m., everything was in place. The lawyers had finished their work. The accounts were frozen. The documentation was compiled. The board was assembled in the adjacent conference room, ready to witness what came next. Dr. Chen stood beside Shirley's desk, his role shifting from doctor to confidant. "Are you sure you're strong enough for this?" he asked quietly. "You were in a coma 6 hours ago." Shirley looked at him with eyes that had regained their full sharpness. "I've been strong enough for years, Marcus. I just forgot for a while." She glanced at the clock. "Make the call." Dr. Chen nodded and pulled out his phone. Anderson's phone rang at exactly 11:48 p.m. He left the dance floor and was sitting in the lounge, 3 more drinks in, the unease from earlier buried under layers of alcohol and forced confidence. He looked at the caller ID, Memorial Hospital. His heart sank. This was it. The call he'd been waiting for. Shirley was gone, and now he had to play the grieving widower. He'd need to sound sad, shocked, devastated. He could do that. He'd been playing roles for 3 years. He answered. "Hello?" "Mr. Rodney, this is Dr. Chen from Memorial Hospital." "Doctor," Anderson said, his voice carefully modulated into concern. Has she... "Mr. Rodney, I need you to come to the hospital immediately. Your boss is here and wants to see you." Anderson's brain stuttered. I'm sorry, what?" "Your boss," Dr. Chen repeated slowly. "The CEO of Rodney Global. They're here at the hospital and have requested an immediate meeting with you. Top floor, founder suite." Anderson sat up straight, alcohol-induced fog evaporating instantly. The CEO is there? Now? Why? They heard about your situation with your wife, Dr. Chen said, his tone professionally neutral. They wanted to meet with you personally to discuss your dedication during this difficult time. I was told to emphasize the urgency. Anderson's mind raced. The CEO, the mysterious, unnamed, never-before-seen CEO of Rodney Global, was at the hospital, right now, wanting to meet him because of his dedication during his wife's medical crisis. This was it. This was the moment he'd been positioning for. The CEO had noticed his commitment, his ability to stay focused even during personal tragedy. This wasn't just about tomorrow's promotion. This was about making an impression on the one person who could catapult him to the very top. "I'll be there in 15 minutes, Anderson said, already standing. "The founder suite, top floor, west wing. Someone will be waiting to escort you." The call ended. Anderson looked at Simone, his eyes wild with excitement. "I have to go. The CEO is at the hospital. They want to meet me, now." Simone's eyes widened. "Tonight? Why would—" "Because they heard I've been handling a crisis with grace and professionalism," Anderson said, straightening his tie and buttoning his jacket. "This is what leadership looks like, staying focused on the company even when personal matters arise." He grabbed his coat. "This is everything, Simone. Everything." He practically ran out of the club, leaving Simone and the half-finished champagne behind. In the Uber, which declined his corporate card, forcing him to use his personal account again, he rehearsed what he'd say, how he'd present himself, how he'd leverage Shirley's condition into proof of his commitment to the company. "She'd want me to stay focused on my work. She always supported my ambitions, even at the end. I think she'd be proud that I didn't let this slow me down." The driver glanced at him in the rearview mirror, but said nothing. Anderson arrived at Memorial Hospital at 12:03 a.m., his suit only slightly disheveled, his breath masked with the emergency mints he kept in his pocket. He walked through the lobby with purpose, barely glancing toward the ER where he'd left Shirley 6 hours ago. An assistant was waiting by the elevators. "Mr. Rodney?" "Yes." "Please follow me." They took the elevator to the top floor. Anderson had never been up here before. He didn't even know this floor existed. The doors opened onto a private corridor with actual artwork on the walls and carpet that absorbed sound. This wasn't a hospital. This was power. The assistant led him to a set of double doors marked Founder Suite. She knocked twice and opened them without waiting for a response. "Mr. Rodney is here," she announced, then stepped aside. Anderson walked in, his heart pounding with anticipation. The room was magnificent, more executive office than hospital suite, with a massive desk positioned in front of floor-to-ceiling windows that showcased the glittering cityscape. Behind that desk sat a figure in a charcoal gray blazer, perfectly postured, hands folded on the desktop. For a moment, Anderson couldn't process what he was seeing. His brain refused to connect the dots. Because the figure behind the desk, the person in the CEO's chair, the boss who'd summoned him, was Shirley, his wife, his dying wife. His brain-dead, terminal, about-to-be life insurance payout wife was sitting upright in a power suit, looking at him with eyes so sharp they could cut steel. "Hello, Anderson," she said, her voice clear and cold. "Please, sit down." Anderson's legs moved on autopilot, carrying him to one of the chairs positioned in front of the desk, like a supplicant before a throne. He sat. His mouth opened, but no words came out. Shirley let the silence stretch, watching him struggle to comprehend. Finally, she spoke again. "I believe you're confused. Let me clarify the situation for you. My name is Shirley Rodney. I am the founder and majority shareholder, 90% to be exact, of Rodney Global Industries, the company where you work, the company you thought you were climbing the ladder in, the company you believed was about to promote you to executive vice president." Anderson's face had gone white. You can't." "I can, Anderson, and I am. I built this company from the ground up after my father's death 5 years ago. Every decision, every acquisition, every strategic move, that was me, not you, never you." "But the promotion was fiction," Shirley said, flatly. created by you, for you, in your own mind. There was never a promotion, Anderson. There was never even respect for your work. You've been coasting on my goodwill for 3 years, and that ends tonight. Anderson's hands gripped the armrests of his chair. Surely, I don't understand what's happening. You are in a coma. You were dying. The doctor said, the doctor said I could hear everything. Shirley cut in, her voice dropping to something dangerous. And I did. I heard you tell your mistress I worked myself to death. I heard you plan to use my life insurance to fund your new life. I heard you toast to freedom and new beginnings while I lay in that bed, unable to move, unable to speak, but fully aware. The color drained from Anderson's face completely now. I didn't mean. You meant every word, Shirley said. She opened the folder on her desk and slid a stack of papers across to him. These are your termination papers, effective immediately. You're fired from Rodney Global. No severance, no references, no exit package. Security will escort you from the premises if you attempt to return. Anderson stared at the papers like they were written in a foreign language. You can't do this. I have contracts. I have rights. You have nothing, Shirley said, her voice like ice. Every contract you signed, I approved. Every promotion you received, I engineered. And every single benefit you thought you'd earned can be revoked by the person who granted them. That person is me. She slid another stack of papers across the desk. These are divorce papers, on the grounds of abandonment and emotional cruelty. Given that you left your wife to die while you partied with your mistress, I don't think any judge will have trouble seeing my case. Shirley, please. And these, she continued, sliding a third stack across, are asset forfeiture documents. Every purchase you made with my money, every luxury you enjoyed at my expense, every single thing you thought was yours, I'm taking it back. The car is being repossessed as we speak. The house is in my name. The watch on your wrist was purchased with my credit card. I'll have security collected on your way out. Anderson stood abruptly, his chair scraping back. This is insane. You can't strip me of everything. I'm your husband. You were my husband, Shirley corrected, standing as well. She was smaller than him, but in that moment, she towered over him. You stopped being my husband the moment you walked out of the ER and told the nurse to call when it was over. You stopped being my partner the moment you toasted to my death. You stopped being anything to me the moment you chose ambition and betrayal over love and decency. The doors behind Anderson opened, and 2 security guards entered, along with Patricia Hamilton and the legal team. Mr. Rodney, Patricia said coolly, we'll need your company ID, your corporate credit cards, and any other Rodney Global property in your possession. That includes the watch, the cufflinks, and the tie pen, all purchased with company funds. Anderson looked around the room wildly, seeing his world collapse in real time. You're all in on this? You're all just going to let her destroy me? She's not destroying you, one of the lawyers said calmly. She's correcting a mistake. You were never qualified for the positions you held. You were never earned the salary you were paid. You were a diversity hire of one, the husband of the CEO, playing dress-up in a world you didn't build. Anderson turned back to Shirley, desperation replacing arrogance. Shirley, please. I know I made mistakes, but we can fix this. We can go to counseling. I can change. Don't throw away 3 years over one bad night. Shirley walked around the desk until she was standing directly in front of him. Up close, he could see the exhaustion still lingering in her eyes, the pallor beneath the makeup. He could see how much it was costing her to stand here, to face him, to do this. But he could also see something else. Resolution. Finality. The death of whatever had once existed between them. It wasn't one bad night, Anderson, she said quietly. It was 3 years of bad nights. 3 years of me hoping you'd see me. Really see me. Not the money, not the connections, not the lifestyle. Just me. But you never did. And tonight, when I needed you most, you proved that you never would. She stepped back, putting distance between them. The only mistake I made was thinking you were capable of loving someone beyond what they could give you. But I won't make that mistake again. She nodded to the security guards. Escort Mr. Rodney out. He's no longer welcome here. The guards moved forward. One of them held out a hand. Your ID and card, sir. Anderson, hands shaking, pulled out his wallet and removed his corporate ID, his company credit cards, his building access key. He placed them in the guard's hand like he was surrendering weapons after a war he'd lost. The watch, sir. Anderson's jaw clenched. The watch had been a gift, or so he'd thought, a reward for his hard work. He'd worn it to every important meeting, every celebration. It was a symbol of his success. It had never been his. He unclasped it and handed it over. And the cufflinks and tie pin. Those too. Piece by piece, he was stripped of the costume he'd worn for 3 years. The costume of a successful executive. The costume of the man who mattered. When he was finished, he looked small, ordinary, like someone who'd been playing a role and had finally been kicked off the stage. This way, sir, the guard said, not unkindly, but firmly. Anderson took one last look at Shirley. She stood behind her desk, every inch the CEO she'd always been, watching him with an expression that held no anger, no sadness, no regret, just finality. I hope it was worth it, Anderson said, his voice bitter. It wasn't. Loving you never was. But learning from it, that's priceless. The guards escorted him to the elevator. The doors closed, and Anderson Rodney descended from the top floor to the ground level, from executive to nothing, from husband to ex, from someone to no one. He walked out of Memorial Hospital at 12:47 a.m. with no job, no car, no home, no future at Rodney Global. His phone buzzed one final time, a notification that his personal credit card had been declined. The champagne he'd bought at the club had maxed it out. He stood on the sidewalk in the cold night air, his expensive suit now just fabric, his empty wrist a reminder of everything he'd lost. Inside, 40 stories up, Shirley sat back down at her desk. Patricia approached cautiously. Are you all right? Shirley took a breath, feeling the weight of the night finally settling on her shoulders. I will be, she said. Then she looked at her reflection in the dark window, seeing not the wife who'd hidden her power, but the CEO who'd reclaimed it. I will be. 3 days later, Anderson sat in a rented studio apartment on the outskirts of the city, the kind of place with thin walls and flickering lights that he would have mocked just a week ago. His phone had been ringing nonstop. Creditors, lawyers, former colleagues who had heard the news. He'd stopped answering after the first day. The story had spread through the corporate world like wildfire. Not the official version. Rodney Global's press release had been professionally vague, announcing only that personnel changes had been made in the interest of the company's continued integrity. But the unofficial version, the one whispered in boardrooms and texted between executives, was far more detailed. Anderson Rodney had been married to the CEO. He'd never known. He'd left her dying in a hospital to party with his mistress. She'd woken up and destroyed him in a single night. His phone buzzed again. This time, he looked. It was Simone. He didn't answer. She tried to reach him 17 times in 3 days. At first, her messages had been concerned, then confused, then angry. The last one, which had come 2 hours ago, simply said, I heard what you did. Don't ever contact me again. Anderson laughed, a hollow sound that echoed in the empty apartment. Everyone was disgusted by what he'd done, but none of them had been disgusted when he was buying drinks at the Apex Club, when he was bragging about his promotions, when he was living a life funded by money he'd never earned. His laptop sat open on the cardboard box he was using as a table. He'd been scrolling through job listings, but every application required references. Every interview would require an explanation for the gap in his resume, for the abrupt termination from Rodney Global. How do you explain that your wife was your boss and you didn't know? How do you spin abandoning someone in the ER into a professional narrative? You don't. A knock at the door interrupted his spiral. Anderson froze. Creditors didn't knock, they sent letters. Lawyers called ahead. He approached the door cautiously and opened it a crack. A courier stood there, clipboard in hand. Anderson Rodney? Yes. Sign here. Anderson signed, and the courier handed him a thick envelope before disappearing down the hallway. Anderson closed the door and stared at the envelope. It was from Shirley's legal team. He recognized the law firm's name embossed on the corner. He opened it with shaking hands. Inside were final divorce papers already signed by Shirley. All he had to do was add his signature and it would be over. Attached was a single sheet of paper with a handwritten note. Anderson, I've instructed my lawyers not to pursue criminal charges for the fraudulent expense reports or the misappropriation of company resources. I've also decided not to sue you for the 3 years of salary you didn't earn. Consider it the cost of a lesson I needed to learn. But understand this, the only reason you're walking away with your freedom is because I choose mercy, not because you deserve it. You taught me what I should have known all along, that hiding who I am to make someone else comfortable is not love. It's self-betrayal. I hope you find whatever it was you were looking for. I hope it makes you happier than I ever could. And I hope someday you understand what you threw away. But I won't be waiting to find out. Shirley Anderson read the note 3 times, each time feeling the words cut deeper. She was giving him mercy. She was letting him go. And somehow that hurt worse than any punishment she could have inflicted. Because it meant she was done. Completely. Finally. Done. He signed the divorce papers with a pen that had been in his jacket pocket, the same jacket he'd worn to the hospital that night. His signature looked weak and uncertain next to hers, which was bold and confident, the signature of someone who knew exactly who they were. 6 months later, Shirley stood at a podium in the main conference hall of Rodney Global's headquarters, addressing the company for the first time as its public-facing CEO. The room was packed. Employees, board members, journalists who'd been trying to get this interview for years. She wore a navy suit with a white blouse, her hair pulled back in the same severe bun she'd worn the night she'd fired Anderson. But her face had color now. The exhaustion had faded. In its place was something stronger, purpose. For years, I've operated behind the scenes, she began, her voice carrying to every corner of the room. I believed that my work should speak for itself, that I didn't need recognition or visibility to be effective. I thought humility was the same as wisdom. She paused, letting the words settle. I was wrong. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Not about the work, that speaks for itself, but about visibility, about representation, about what it means to lead not just from the shadows, but from the front. She looked out at the faces watching her. There are people in this room, people in this company, people in this world who need to see that leadership doesn't have to be loud to be powerful, that strength doesn't have to be aggressive to be effective, that a woman can build an empire and still be underestimated, until she decides she's done being underestimated. Applause started in the back and rolled forward like a wave. Shirley held up a hand, quieting them. I'm not here to tell you a story about betrayal or revenge. I'm here to tell you about resurrection, about what it means to lose yourself trying to be what someone else needs, and what it costs to find yourself again. She smiled, and it was real this time. It's expensive, it's painful, but it's worth every moment. More applause, louder now. So moving forward, Rodney Global will operate with a new philosophy: transparency, accountability, and the understanding that hiding our strengths to make others comfortable helps no one. We will lead with our full selves, and we will expect the same from every person in this organization. She closed her notes and looked directly at the camera recording the event. To anyone watching who's ever made themselves smaller to fit into someone else's vision of who you should be, stop. The world doesn't need smaller versions of you. It needs you at full volume, full strength, fully alive. And if someone can't handle that, that's their limitation, not yours. The room erupted. People stood, applauding, and Shirley felt something she hadn't felt in 3 years. Seen, not as a wife, not as a secret, but as herself, completely and unapologetically. That evening, Shirley returned to the Founder's Suite, not as a patient, but as a guest. Dr. Chen had insisted on a follow-up appointment, though they both knew she was fine. She sat in the same chair where Anderson had sat 6 months ago, but this time the energy was different, lighter. "You look good," Dr. Chen said, reviewing her chart. "Better than good, actually. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it." "I'm living," Shirley said simply. "Turns out that makes a difference." Dr. Chen smiled and set down the chart. "Your father would be proud, you know. Robert always said you had steel in your spine. He just worried you'd forget it was there." "I did," Shirley admitted, "for a while. But steel doesn't rust just because you ignore it. It's still there, waiting." "And Anderson?" Dr. Chen asked carefully. "Have you heard anything?" "He's working at a marketing firm in another state," Shirley said. "Entry-level position. I heard through the network." She paused. "I don't wish him ill, Marcus. I just wish him gone." "And he is." Dr. Chen nodded. "That's healthier than most people manage after betrayal like that." "Maybe, or maybe I just spent all my anger that night. There's nothing left but indifference." She stood, collecting her coat. "And honestly, indifference feels better than love ever did with him." She left the hospital that evening and walked to her car, a new one, something she'd picked out herself without considering anyone else's opinion. The city lights reflected off the windshield as she drove home, and for the first time in years, she didn't feel like she was driving towards something. She felt like she was driving forward. Just forward. And that was enough. Anderson saw the article in a business magazine while waiting at a dentist's office. The cover featured Shirley in a power suit, standing in front of Rodney Global's headquarters, with the headline, "The CEO Who Rose from the Dead, How Shirley Rodney Rebuilt an Empire and Herself." He picked up the magazine with hands that still shook slightly when he thought about that night. The article detailed her success. The company's stock had tripled under her visible leadership. She'd launched 3 new divisions. She'd been named one of the most influential CEOs